first question, this is a surface-to-air missile that we're talking about. Kind of explain for people who have no idea what that is. What does that mean?
Well, easily to understand, you have a missile from the ground going into the air, surfaced to air, and usually developed to attack and damage, destroy aircraft of various kinds, fixed wing, rotary, drones as well. And the many different kinds, and each military war or conflict has its own one or two that may be developed or used more often than others. Frankly, I think the kind of surface-to-air missile is probably less important in terms of what the general public might want to know about what happened in the last 24 hours.
What do you know about this?
Hold on, can we move your sort of rubbing against the mic? Can you move your glass? Yeah, perfect.
Do we need to repeat that? Or
No, that's okay. So a lot of the talk, you know, maybe you don't think this is that important either, but a lot of the talk has been about this Buke launcher, and where could someone get something like this? How did they get their hands on this piece of machinery? Is that something that is commonly used? Is that something that...
It's most likely that whatever was used, and different people still have opinions, different intelligence communities still have different opinions about what exactly occurred, but there's an international mass market in this kind of a thing, a weapons market, both legal and illegal, licit and illicit. It's probably more likely that it came from directly or indirectly Russian military or paramilitary capabilities, and either used by the Russians or given to Ukrainian rebels in eastern or southeastern Ukraine. That's probably most likely, regardless of where the surface-to-air missile was actually launched from.
And do you believe it's going to be possible to figure out exactly where the missile launch did take place?
Oh, no question about it. In fact, although the mass media is talking about the formal investigation, who's going to lead it, what's going to happen, what will be discovered, in actuality, sophisticated intelligence organizations in the U.S., Russia, China, and some others as well, because there's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week surveillance of certain areas, especially politically and militarily volatile areas like the Ukraine. Information's already been collected and analyzed. There are already people who know exactly what happened, where it happened from, what was used, and even some of the folks who might have been involved in the ultimate strategic decision to go forward or not with it. Now, that's classified information at different levels. Some of it will be released to the general public, but this is not a mystery like the Malaysian aircraft 370. This Malaysian 17 aircraft is very little mystery in terms of what happened.
So you think that right now the intelligence officials could tell us, yes, it came from Moscow, no, it didn't?
Certain members of certain intelligence organizations, in my opinion, already know pretty much everything that's happened, and that means some of their political leaders have been briefed on this already. It may be more of a mystery to the general public, but not to people in the know within the intelligence community, certain intelligence organizations.
Would it be possible to use this type of technology without advanced, possibly government training, or is this something that somebody can figure out on their own if they get their hands on this?
In my opinion, with minimal training, many kinds of surface-to-air missiles can be successfully implemented. That's why when any power, a great power like the U.S., to a lesser extent like Russia or the People's Republic of China, when it's a question of either giving or sharing or selling military equipment, the issue is always who may use it, what might they use it for, what kinds of political, legal, or military constraints there may be, and so on.
Now, when you looked at the footage, did you believe, because we've heard some different kind of analysis on this too, it seems like this would have been a situation if it was a ground-to-air strike, that it would have just exploded in the sky, but a lot of people are going, okay, well, it looks more like it kind of crashed. When you analyze what you see from the scene, what does it tell you about how this plane went down?
Well, let me give you the following analogy here. First of all, the Russians have shot down other aircraft in the past, commercial and otherwise. Sometimes it's a direct hit, sometimes not. Depending on the nature of the explosive warhead and other explosive capabilities, an aircraft may be demolished in the sky or just partially damaged, so it may fly a little bit longer or it may just come right down. Different possibilities. It's all applied physics, quite frankly.
Gotcha. So we understand now that there's an FAA ban, or at the very least a recommendation not to fly in this region.
Well, there's actually a bigger story here. Many people are talking about aviation safety, aviation security. What can we learn from what happened once the general public learns what happened? Just real briefly, there's a bigger story here. It goes back to the late 1980s when the Soviet Union was disestablished. What became Russia lost a lot of territory, power, control, areas of interest. Now with the current Putin administration, there seems to be little question a decision's been made to take as much territory back, get as much power or control back, get a larger area of interest and influence. It's already happened in Georgia, portions of Georgia, in Moldova, in the Crimea, now in the Ukraine, and possibly other areas as well. The big story here is that I believe the Putin administration has come to the conclusion that the U.S. will not dedicate American military capabilities to the Ukraine, neither will NATO military capabilities be dedicated. So if you can tolerate economic sanctions, you have a lot of flexibility, a lot of opportunity to take back what you think is rightfully yours. And I believe President Putin thinks he can create a huge legacy for himself. And what happened in the last 24 hours, directly or indirectly, is related to that larger strategic issue.
Knowing the dangers of that region and knowing that many airlines were choosing not to go in that region, what would be the advantage for them to fly that route? Was it economic?
Well, that's a great question. Although we talk about global and international aviation security and safety, there are different organizations that provide guidance. The FAA, the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, Europe has one as well. There are others. Each airline, each country, each organization will have its own priorities. What it will do for revenue generation, how much it needs the revenue, what kind of liability and due diligence it will go through, even the very valuation of how important it is to lose a life or not. And there are other political and psychological issues as well. So different decisions are made. Certainly, some airlines have already made the decision not to fly anywhere near there. Others continue to. With this, at least in the short term, probably fewer of those kinds of things will be going on. But in terms of actual safety and security lessons learned, I think there's really little to learn except when you fly in a war zone, whether it's legally a war zone or just a de facto war zone, you're really increasing the risk to the safety and security of your aircraft.
Could something like this happen in the United States?
Well, there's no question that a surface-to-air missile, whether surface-to-air or maybe a shoulder-launched missile, could destroy aircraft in this country. There's no question that our intelligence and law enforcement capabilities in this country view that as a potential threat, especially around major airports, which would include Sky Harbor as well. So this is not a surprise that it's happened. There have been other attacks as well. There was one off the coast of Kenya a few years ago against an Israeli aircraft. There have been other incidents in the Mideast. In fact, going back to the initial Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, well, that's over 30 years now, surface-to-air missiles provided by Russia, or back then the Soviet Union, have circulated throughout the world to terrorist organizations on the international weapons black market and so on. So they're not that difficult to get, and with the right planning, sophisticated planning, not that difficult to use to damage or destroy an aircraft, whether it's this country or some other country.
What is our biggest threat, would you say, to commercial airlines at this time in our country?
Well, I think the good news, our sophistication of collecting intelligence information and analyzing it and getting to people who can use it to help our safety and security is way better than it was before 9/11. And because of that, the nature of the threat, vulnerabilities, and you put them together and get a risk, all of that is really ever changing. So when you ask me what's the greatest threat, it's really changing, and it should be, and our safety and security posture changes around commercial airports and elsewhere in this country, depending on that intelligence. People talk about aviation safety and security. What they really should be talking about is the quality of American intelligence collection and analysis capabilities. It all begins with the intelligence. That's what's really crucial. And again, we're doing a much better job post than pre-9/11.
Do you believe that this what happened today, this crash, was related to the two earlier crashes this week in that region? this all? Do you think this is all the same?
Well,
or all the same technology?
If you go back a week or two, there have been attacks on military transport aircraft owned and controlled by the Ukrainian government. At least one fighter jet controlled and owned by the Ukrainian government. Well, there's commercial aircraft. Different kinds of attacks have occurred, depending on how fast an aircraft is traveling, how high or low it might be, acceleration, deacceleration, velocity, all the rest of it. Different kinds of weapons can be more or less effective. This is really a global threat, and certainly something that people in the intelligence community, but also in the aviation safety and security communities worry about every day. It's a high priority, and that's good news for the traveling public.
And it seems like whenever there's a crash, the first thing people want to know is what's on the black box. Does that help in a situation like this?
In this kind of a situation, I don't think it's really that important, whether it's a voice recorder or a recording of technical parameters. Again, I think there are already people who know exactly what happened. There's little mystery here. Just a question of how the information is going to come out to the general public and what the political and military and really strategic implications are going to be when attribution is finally made either to the Russian government, some kind of miscalculation or intention on the part of a fragment of Ukrainian rebels or other possibilities as well.
Is it valuable to sift through the wreckage? I mean, is there anything useful there?
Well, there'll be a formal investigation and there'll be more technical support, probably at an unclassified level for what happened. But again, I think there's not much of a mystery here. There are people who I believe, because of the kind of sophisticated technical intelligence capabilities certain countries have, who already have a great idea of what happened, who's responsible, and all the rest of it.
How long does an investigation on this go on?
Well, unfortunately, there are a lot of political parameters. Sometimes it goes on longer or less than it should. It all depends on what kind of report needs to be written, what kind of political necessities there are to support conclusions and speculation and hypotheses. But again, in this particular situation, the length has really little to do with the truth. Often a long report taking a long time will do a better job. That's really not an issue here.
And what agency will investigate this?
Well, different agencies are chosen depending on the airline, where it occurred. Sometimes there are other political decisions that are made. Again, in this particular situation, the leaders of many countries, including our country, are really thinking in terms of political and military implications. Much unlike the Malaysian aircraft 370, there's little attention, little focus on trying to come up with the best investigative capabilities that formally occur in any aircraft crash investigation. Those are really secondary in this particular situation.
Anything that I didn't ask you that you think is important for me to include?
Well, there's one thing I hope you include. Just yesterday, by coincidence, up at Embry-Riddle, we have the only college of security and intelligence in the world, quite frankly, certainly at the undergraduate level. We're doing simulations in Ukraine about the kinds of things that were coming over the border from Russia to Ukraine, the kinds of people, the kinds of fighters, the kinds of military-related technology and infrastructure, and what were the implications for safety and security for all transportation, including aviation. And then we were factoring that into high-level elite decision-making in Russia. We were actually talking about the kind of factors that I'm sure are involved in what happened with this commercial aircraft shoot-down. And we try to turn out the best students we can because we give them realistic simulations. In this case, they were practicing something that occurred within 24 hours of our exercise.
Wow. How many students?
In this particular case, I had 16. I had 2 groups of 8, and each of them were working the situation to compete against each other, who could come up with the best analysis, the best recommendations, the best estimate of threat, of vulnerability, of risk, and then come up with policy recommendations for elite political decision makers in various countries. And that's the kind of thing we do every day at Embry-Riddle. It's more than just an aviation-related institution. Whether it's the technical engineering or the political, social, security, and intelligence aspects, we put it all together. So when this kind of event occurs, we can share different expertise, either with the mass media, with government, with business, and so forth.